So, welcome to A Day in a Life. I'm your host, Rachel Miles Shiachich, and today I have my good friend Annick Huber on. And Annick is a product designer. And Annick and I met her through our master's program at Georgia Tech, and we were in very similar degree programs, but not exactly. But that's a whole other thing I won't get into. And our classes had a lot of overlap, and we just became closer after I feel like we became closer after we had both graduated because we ended up working together in the same building and would go get lunch together. And I just think Annick's overall life journey is super fascinating. Her father is a diplomat, so she's lived all over the world, and she started her career as an illustrator before becoming a product designer. She's also about to be a mom, and we just have so much to talk about. So welcome, Annick.
Thank you.
Yeah. So kind of typically start talking about like kind of work and how you got there in the first half, and then we'll talk more about life in general in the second half. So you started off as an illustrator, and so how did you get into illustration in the first place?
I think that is something that I wanted to do since I was about 13 years old. I remember I was always an avid reader. I loved books and I loved fantasy books especially. I remember at 13, I started looking at just the covers of the books and seeing that if you look around, they tell you who the illustrator is by name. And I remember just researching, oh, let's look up who this person is, start checking out portfolios online. And I actually even emailed one of them and asked, hey, how do you become this? How do you do this? And I'd say it's something I've pursued just ever since I was 13 and all the way till I graduated from SCAD in 2012. Kind of a life goal that I went into a lot. Eventually, kind of switched to working in video games as a concept artist and illustrator, and not just books. And that's kind of what I ended up doing. So my first job out of college was working for a game company creating environment art. So that's kind of what I specialized in for a while, is just environment assets. And I especially loved the game environment, game design, because I think I've always been very interested in, I would say, software development in its own way. And there's actually a lot of overlap. Uh, Video games is a type of software. I ended up getting passionate by the complexities of limitations of art assets when you have to make them for software, especially in the time when I started working. It was very much the phone apps and Facebook apps and the boom of all those things when phones had very little memory, the computers weren't that strong. So you really had to go by a lot of limitations when you were working on games there. I also ended up working in animation for a while, also doing environment art. And while I enjoyed it, I was always more into the game side of things.
That's cool. I didn't know that. I knew about the game design and like and the animation side, but I didn't know you were originally interested in book illustration. So did you illustrate books?
I didn't end up doing that, honestly. Part of being a book illustrator is really much being a freelancer. And I quickly ended up figuring out that I don't really enjoy freelancing all that much. There's just a lot of self promotion and a lot of handling your own business that actually comes with the business of being a freelancer. And I realized that one, I was not very good at promoting myself. So doing it on a constant basis was actually really draining and difficult. You have to send mailers to a lot of editorials. You have to go and do a lot of interacting with other people and getting people to know who you are. And friends of friends are the ones that get you uh, every job, but it's not like getting a job. You have to get jobs all the time. I quickly ended up finding out that while I love the idea of illustrating for books, the general freelancing that comes with it was not necessarily for me.
Yeah, I can see that, especially that point about like, because I mean, the job search just for a job is exhausting, but like you, as you say, it's like jobs and jobs and jobs you have to get with doing that. So yeah, that definitely sounds pretty
And
tiring.
eventually you do find recurring clients and it
Mhm.
becomes more regular, but I just never got to that point. I always struggled with the more social aspect.
Yeah, that makes sense. And could you explain a little bit more what you meant by like the limitations you have to deal with, especially like on the app games? Is it like file size or like what?
Yeah, a lot of it was file size. I remember a specific task was we wanted to create an environment that had a lot of gigantic buildings, you know, because it was, I remember I worked on The Walking Dead, the social game, and other games of that kind. And it was very city oriented with skyscrapers and the like. A skyscraper asset would be a gigantic asset. So we couldn't actually fit an asset of that size into the game. And then so what do? We create a skyscraper and just put it in pieces. The memory just doesn't handle that much big images. So I remember having to find a solution to create modular pieces to be able to kind of puzzle together multiple skyscrapers where you reuse enough pieces so that you can build it and you don't load a gigantic asset. So those kind of puzzles were really what interested me a lot. And I found it was fun. I remember it was very much a challenge. Like, I don't think you can find a way to put that big asset there. And I'm like, I think I can find a way.
Nice. Challenge accepted.
Yeah.
I it's funny because yeah, it's like there's so much to building a world, and a lot of if you're when you're just consuming it, you don't necessarily think
Mhm.
about that. And it's yeah, it's a lot. Like especially like and I've been reading some comics lately, and I don't even think about like, oh yeah, the like illustrator has to like draw all the background characters and like because always focus on like the main characters and what's going on, but then it's like, wow, there's like that whole world behind them that happens.
Yeah, when you're a comic artist, you actually have to be really, really good at drawing like perspective and backgrounds and like distances and giving the impression of depth and all that. But
Yeah.
yeah, games have that very modular aspect where you need to figure out how to maximize assets so that they serve as many purposes as possible because you have to deal with memory load.
Yeah, I can see that. And people get frustrated when a game loads slowly and yeah, definitely a challenge. So how did you end up switching into product design?
So when I was studying specifically concept art for video games was my minor in college. And I remember taking a class that was interactive design. And in that class, we had to do things like wireframe a website, think about the use cases of the website, and start thinking of those things. And that's when I kind of got my first dip into what UX was and how it worked. And I found it very interesting. But honestly, at the time, I was very much tunnel visioned and I'm going to draw for a job and that's what I'm going to get better at. And but I still had to do things like create a portfolio website, worry about the SEO of the portfolio, the SEO of my name, and how our users, who are the target users for this portfolio site, how are they going to experience this website? And it's kind of funny thinking back because that was one of the things that I enjoy doing most is just tinkering with my website and keep making it better for the target audience. Um, and I remember when I was job hunting, there were just UX jobs everywhere. This was again 2012, 2013. I was job hunting very much for game artists jobs. And yeah, UX designer, just jobs everywhere at the time. So eventually I was like, maybe I should look into this more. Um, and especially after my second artist job that was in animation, I worked on a TV show called The Chosen, which aired on FX. I was working at the studio that creates Archer, so the animated show, which is also here in Atlanta. And Chosen unfortunately did not get renewed for a second season. So there were just like 50% layoffs in the studio. And that was kind of the realization that it still has this type of job is still not the kind where you find a job and you kind of stay there for a while. It's just this constant stream of looking for other work. And I remember all the people who got laid off with me, most of them moved to other cities. And it was the realization that if I wanted to continue with this career, I have to keep chasing jobs around and have my life revolve around the job. And part of me kind of thought that the hard part with being an artist as a job was getting it going and getting these jobs. And that was my realization that it doesn't end actually. The chasing is the job. It's part of the career. And I think eventually, if you go to a big enough hub like California, you could actually just stay there and chase jobs and it'd be easier. But in a place like Atlanta, there's not enough jobs in this field to actually just keep at this career. And growing up, again, traveling a lot, my father was a consul. It was very much, let's move every 3 years for the sake of the job. I mean, it was completely move countries, but I got really attached to the idea of being able to choose where I want to live and just find a job there. And of course, that wouldn't work for just about any town, but in a city like Atlanta, it seemed like it should be feasible to just find a job in my career. And that's kind of where part of where I decided to pursue doing UX as a career and as a job. One part because I had dipped my toes and be like, this is actually really interesting, and I think I really like it. And I've always also been interested in software development. I didn't really want to become a software developer myself, but I like the field of working on software more than I like the field of working in animation. I tended to think the job was a little repetitive on its own. And I realized that maybe the sacrifices that I was making weren't worth how much I liked doing this kind of job, which is, again, part of why I ended up switching to UX and product design.
Yeah, wow. It's quite a journey and lots to think about. I did have a random question I was curious about. Like, is there a difference between calling someone a user experience or UX designer versus a product designer?
I'd say it's a very subtle difference. The activities that the two jobs engage in are very much the same. It's very much doing research, and based on research, creating wireframe user journeys, thinking of like the user itself, user experience, and creating prototypes, working alongside product and development to actually implement the designs that you create and so on. I would say that my vision of it is that the UX designer is a bit more project oriented, whereas the product designer is a bit more product oriented. So a UX designer sometimes is more likely to work in like an agency environment or work in a project by project basis where you're very much assigned a project and your job is kind of to bring it to completion and implement it. Whereas the product designer, I see them more as working just a little more closely with product department and caring more about the overall product experience and a bit more ownership and responsibility over the product itself than the UX designer. But the activities are very much the same. I think it's more of an approach to how you're looking at what your responsibilities are.
Yeah, okay, I could see that. I've just been, snooping around on LinkedIn and I'm seeing people's job titles and I've always seen people who are considering themselves UX designers, calling themselves product designers, and I'm just kind of wondering like is
And there's also, I tend to think that UX designers, most of them are very, very UX focused. And there's a clear distinction between UI designers and UX designers. Product designers are often expected to do more of the visual design than UX designers, in my experience. And that might be some of it too. It's not always the case. There's sometimes a visual designer and a product designer.
Mhm.
But I've experienced a lot of places where they just skip having a UI designer and the product designer is just responsible for more of everything.
All the things. Got it. But so both of your jobs though, like illustration and product design, they're kind of still, I guess, well, I don't know. Would you consider illustration part of design? I kind of wanted to know what
Yeah.
you love about design as a field. Like it seems like it's a natural sort of transition in a way.
Yeah. Basically, my entire career has been very visual communication focused. They are both methods to communicate visually with people rather than with text. So in that way, I would say it's very much a type of design. It just focuses more on like the craftsmanship of rendering in some ways. But there's so many different types of illustration, and you can even get into abstract illustration, which gets more into design. But ultimately you still have to learn for both fields, understand like composition, white space, color balance, color theory, and all the design principles apply no matter what. So I would say that they're very much all design.
Yeah. And what do you love about design in general?
uh, I enjoy visual communication. So I grew up speaking two, three different languages. So when talking across languages, you kind of have to learn a lot of how to speak in different languages. But with visual communication, it tends to be a bit more instinctual, and you're all kind of understand the same things regardless of what your language background is. And I like that part about design and visual communication.
Yeah, especially like with things that are kind of standardized when you go to different countries usually. I mean, not always, but like the bathroom logo is pretty much the same or something like that. Like you're able to get these kind of cues like from the iconography, which is helpful. I feel like.
Yeah, and there's symbolism that differs depending on countries, but then there's also a lot of commonalities, and it's interesting to see the difference between what everyone understands and what not everyone does.
Yeah, I mean, as I was giving that bathroom example, I was thinking about a time where I had my in-laws with us, my Serbian in-laws, and their English is not like they can understand things, but they don't like speak English fluently.
Mhm.
And we took them to Zaxby's which is a like a southern like chicken restaurant, kind of like Chick-fil-A, but more southeast regional for those who don't know. And at Zaxby's, their restroom signs say like chicks, and I don't know, they're images of like a chicken and like a like a hen and like a rooster.
I
And
always
that
get a
was
little frustrated when I see those because I'm
yeah.
also foreign, so a lot of the symbolism and like the little in jokes that haha we're playing on cultural references. It's like, but I don't get them.
Right. Yeah. I was kind of frustrated. I was because they didn't know which one to go to. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, it's like that's a very abstract kind of thing. And even sometimes if you really have to go, something that kind of abstract might like slow you down.
You shouldn't be putting barriers on understanding what bathroom you're supposed to use. I
Yeah.
currently have my mother visiting, who is also not super fluent with English. And yeah, as we navigate around the world, there's a lot of things that I just have to translate and explain because she just doesn't get it.
Yeah. That is definitely something that'll be really interesting to talk about in a little bit for a little bit more. But I do want to talk a little bit about how in your career you've taken a couple breaks and like first with like switching careers and
Mhm.
going back to school, and now while you're getting ready to be a mom. And I feel like in a lot of ways that's giving you a lot of time of reflection, and it seems like it's working out pretty well for you. And like what would you say are those like advantages to just giving yourself extra time?
Yeah, I would say my first break that I took was right after high school when I moved to the US. First, I wasn't sure. I finished high school in Switzerland, and right when I finished high school, my parents were moving from Poland to the United States. I was living with my grandmother at the time, and I decided to move with them and do a 1 year sabbatical to learn English and just see the United States. And I ended up learning English in that 1 year, but also figuring out is like, do I want to go back to Switzerland and do art school there, or do I want to go to art school in the United States? And just not necessarily knowing what direction I was going to take. Eventually, I ended up going to SCAD, which happened to be in Atlanta. I remember SCAD is kind of country renowned in the United States, but I discovered it because we walked by it before we had a car to get groceries. And I'm like, oh, look, there's an art school there. Let's go check it out. And then after visiting it and exploring, I was like, I very much want to go there because I was into digital illustration. And at the time, it was 2007, 2008. Switzerland did not have like very advanced learning of digital art, especially digital illustration. You could study graphic design or you can study painting, you know. And I loved the idea that I could get to use Wacom tablets and really get more in depth and more choices into exactly what I wanted to study. So that's why I ended up going there. But it took a year of learning English and passing the test of English proficiency and getting the right grades for it to even start going there. So that was my first year of reflection of what I wanted to do. And then, yes, once there was a bit of a break before going to, I think Georgia Tech was kind of the break because I remember first I got laid off from Floyd, which was a company where I was working on an animated show. But then while I applied to Georgia Tech, and in between I got another job working at Bento Box on, it was an animated TV show called The Awesomes, which is on Hulu, but mostly I realized that I was definitely able to find other jobs if I wanted to continue. And I also got job offers to move to California and go work on some new animated TV show there. And that was me very much deciding, hey, look, I have options. And I don't want to do that. I wasn't enjoying my bento box job all that much, but it paid the bills and it filled the holes. And yeah, after bento box, I started Georgia Tech. And I wouldn't call that a break.
No, true.
But it was definitely a time to really redecide exactly what I was going to focus on, because I had an idea of what UX was, but part of why I wanted to do that master is like, let me understand exactly what skills it requires and what the job is and what is expected of us. And it really allowed me to learn mostly about research and understand the importance of user research for product design, because there were a lot of questions. I thought that, well, you go to school and you learn some psychology and then you understand where to put the buttons, you know, and those kind of things. But turns out that it's not quite that simple, which is good and bad, because that's why people like us are needed. uh, but yeah, that was kind of my second break, which was more of like a switching and understanding where I was gonna go with my career. And yeah, now I'm taking my third break, which feels a bit more of a break than the last one, because it's a bit of different when you're just scrambling to find work and filling in gaps than it is when you've decided, okay, now I'm just gonna take it slow. And but it's very much because I'm very pregnant. So I've taken a break for a few months before delivering, and I'll be taking a break for about 6 months after delivering before looking for work. And I see it very much as I want to focus on this new thing that I'm doing, which is being a mom and having a newborn. And because I have the opportunity to be able to take this time off, I want to do it. And in my opinion, there's just not enough time given by American laws and the American world in general to mothers for caring for the newborn. It's like, oh, you have just enough time to physically recover from birth. Let's get you back in the office. So I decided to disengage from work for a bit and just do this right for myself.
I think that's really important and something like really important to talk about too, because like the United States doesn't give a long time, whereas in Europe, I mean, that's like something I'm sure you have a lot of opinions about
Oh
maternity
yeah.
leave in Europe versus here.
And you know, even Europe, it's not like it's a monolith. Every country in Europe has its own laws and its own ways of doing things. So the dream is very much like, I think it was Norway or Sweden, where they're like, take a year or two off, and both parents can do it and focus on just the baby. And it's like, that seems absolutely wonderful. But a lot of places give you like 12 months or 18 months at mostly paid. uh, Most of your pay is given. And where I come from, which is Switzerland, I think it's like 4 months for mothers, and I think like 2 weeks for fathers. But it's not yet a very equal society in that way. But at least it's those 4 months of guaranteed leave. And honestly, as I was even looking for what kind of job I would want to have to stay at my work in order to have this pregnancy, I was thinking that I wouldn't take anything less than 16 weeks.
Yeah, that's a lot of considerations.
And there are jobs that give you 16 weeks in the US, but it's they're the top tech jobs.
Mm-hmm.
At the big companies with lots of benefits, they will give you that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and I guess that's where the field of product design is a little advantageous in that way if you work at one of those companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, I was not at one of those companies, so I decided to just take a break instead.
Yeah.
And I also ventured in what if I tried to get a job while dealing with the pregnancy, but there was a lot of it's really difficult to even talk with prospective employers when you know you're months away from giving birth. And how do you even talk about it? It's just difficult. When do you bring it up? Are you being duplicitous when you're hiding it all the way till the end? And it was causing me too much anxiety.
Yeah, that's definitely a lot. It's like, okay, is it going to affect whether or not they hire me? So should I hide it? Or then like, are they going to be mad at me if I don't tell
Yeah.
them?
All
Yeah.
recruiters will tell you to hide it, which
Oh,
makes me
wow.
uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, because that's like a big part of your life. And eventually there's a point where you can't hide it. I mean, when you're online, maybe a little more, but
I
at the
mean,
same
eventually
time,
you can't, because you have to take time off. Like,
yeah,
you
true.
don't know how your birth is going. You have to recover near the end of the pregnancy. You can't sit down for a whole day, so you'd have to communicate it at some point.
Yeah.
And then after giving birth, you're on bed rest. You can't work.
Right.
And then there's a crying baby. Every 2 hours you have to feed him. How
And
do you deal with that?
yeah, and you shouldn't have to. Yeah. So yeah, so I guess I'm curious, like what's a day in the life like for you and how has it changed since the pandemic started?
Well, for me, there's been a lot of changes depending on when the question was asked. A day of my life right now is not the same as a day of my life 3 months ago, which is not the same as a day in my life 6 months ago. Uh, so I am currently 39 weeks pregnant, meaning I am actually 1 week away from giving birth.
Oh,
Well, 1 week away from my due date. We don't actually know when the birth happens, because right now I'm at a point where it could happen at any moment. uh I could start having contractions in the middle of this call and be like, all right, labor is starting.
I yeah.
So a day of my life right now is not at all like a day of my life at any other point in time. I am extremely tired. I already took an afternoon nap today on top of sleeping all night. I'm lucky. I'm getting a good amount of sleep. A lot of pregnant women struggle with sleeping a lot. Um, but overall, yeah, I'm just very tired. My back starts to and my stomach start to hurt from sitting too much. So I lay down most of the day. And my life is just not its usual self. It's very interrupted. I can't really walk anywhere. I'm nervous to drive. So right now there's just a lot of resting and not doing very much and waiting for something to happen. Uh, so that's a day in my life right now. 3 months ago, I was focusing on, so I had already decided to, I had already left my job, but I was focusing on creating art and getting back into illustration just for my own personal pleasure. And very much creating some paintings and artwork, and starting, I wanted to create some digital illustrations and try to maybe make a Etsy shop, which I might get back into after birth when I can sit for more than an hour at a time. And yeah, focusing on portfolio, reading a lot of books, and just doing some planning for how I'm going to prepare for looking for work again, which I want to do in 6 months. And that's kind of where I want to get back to once I recover from childbirth. And then 6 months ago, I was working. So it was very much, I've been enjoying remote working a lot. I've been able to take a lot of walks and focus a bit on my health, but also I have set up my office to be very much exactly how I want it. I have access to all my books and resources, and yeah, just working fairly regular hours. And but a lot of the work is kind of the same as before the pandemic. We all work in digital fields on our computers. My softwares are still very much accessible to me, so yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard to say what's going well.
Well, that was a great answer for kind of a complicated question, since your life is like in so many different transitions right now. That was
Yeah.
like, yeah. I kind of have a question about, like, all right, I keep saying I want to like get into art and drawing more. Like I only took one class in college, but I don't know, I get kind of like I get I don't know, self-conscious or something, and I'm like, should I take an art class or should I just like be drawing something? Do you have any like advice for like people who want to start out?
I personally love art classes because they give you guidance and just a place to do the art, a place to access the supplies, and like scheduled time where you're just gonna be drawing. And because you're in an environment where other people are making art, it's inspiring. So I would support the idea of a communal drawing in classes, and I think that they could be extremely helpful to just get you going. But overall, there's no reason not to do it on your own time whenever you want. The only way to really get better at art is to make art. um, it's not, I'm an avid proponent that it is not a skill that people are born with. People aren't inherently good at drawing or at making art or any of those things. It's something that people get good at through practice and by doing it a lot. If someone seems skilled at art really early in life, it must be because they've been enjoying it a lot and therefore they've been doing it a lot. So by the time you've met them, they've already had their 10,000 hours of art under their belt. So usually that's how it goes. The more you do it, the better you are at it.
That is very encouraging. And yeah, I like the idea of like going to class, because I think for all the things you said, it's like a set time, you have people around, and it's encouraging. So maybe when those things are
And
available again.
structure can also help. If only someone
Mhm.
to tell you what books to read next that could fit what you are trying to achieve with your own art, because there are infinite resources out there on how to get better. On one hand, it's a skill that, yeah, you get better to practicing, but as everything else, there's reading and things that you can learn that will help you do a big jump in skill, as opposed to just doing the thing wrong all the time.
Yeah, totally. Getting that mentorship. Um, so yeah, you were talking about doing illustration for you and for fun. What are like your tips in general for having a good work-life balance?
I think scheduling is a lot of it. Make sure to keep, what helps is keeping the boundaries of your time as assigned, and to really plan your life and to have the things you want to do in it. I'm still gonna have to learn a lot of work-life balance. That's part of why I'm taking this long break, is that I'm gonna have a baby, and newborns are time huge time drains. I think when they come out, it's a 24/7 thing, and then slowly I'll have to learn how to fit other things. So rather than suddenly going back to work and figuring out how I schedule all these things, I'm gonna try to just get used little by little to how to integrate life into having a baby. But I think it's a lot easier to have work-life balance when you don't have children. So now that I'm gonna have a child, I'll have to learn how to do this on my own too. So that'll be my own journey.
A lot to relearn. Yeah. And yeah, so what are some of the things you've been doing to get ready to have your baby?
There's a lot of things. One big thing is scheduling daycare. So in my area, all daycares get full about a year in advance, considering it takes 9 months to make a baby. Once you know that your body is making a baby, it means that you immediately have to start calling daycares and figuring out where you can send your kid, and scheduling, yeah, just the planning of how having a job is going to work with having this child, because someone has to take care of it. So that was one of the first things I did, is decide way ahead of time when I was going to go back to work, because I need daycare scheduled. I can't suddenly decide, well, how about next month, because there will not be childcare available then. So that's something I planned really early on. Other than that, as I mentioned, my mother is currently here with me. I come from a half Latino, half Swiss family, and Latinos are very much of the culture of it takes a village. So my mother very, very excitedly wanted to come here and help and be here for the process. So she's staying with us for a couple months for the birth and after the birth. And she just had a refresh on how to care for children, because my sister gave birth to twins 2 years ago, and my mother was helping with that as well. So I expect she'll be very, very helpful. She plans on making a lot of food, so that's just one less thing for me to worry about once I'm in recovery. And what else? Just getting all the stuff, everything that I need for the baby, and reading books on parenting, doing research. There's just endless things that had to be done. But that's why I'm thankful that I had a few months to prepare without having to worry about my job on a daily basis, because it allowed me to figure out what I needed to research and take the time, things like just meeting with a pediatrician so that I have a doctor scheduled for the baby, going on a tour with the daycares to figure out, is this really where I want to bring the baby? And just the doctor appointments. Right now they're weekly, so I can't imagine like for our kind of jobs, think they wouldn't mind for us to just go to the doctor every week. But I imagine in a lot of different occupations, employers could have a very negative opinion of a mother needing to take time every single week to go to the doctor. And it's not like it's just an hour in and out. Sometimes there are wait times. There might be an issue, so then you have to stay longer, and it's just hard to plan around. So there's just a lot to do in preparation for the baby to come.
Yeah. And it looks like you're never ready. And like, I mean, I think that's something you probably have to accept too. It's just like there's so much, and you're ready. You're ready.
Yeah, I feel like I'm as ready as can be,
Mhm.
because I had the opportunity of having this time off, and to me it was invaluable. But I also deeply appreciate that it's a privilege. It's not something that everyone can do.
Right. Yeah. So talking about your mother being here for a few months, and just like what are some like other like kind of cultural differences you've experienced between like the United States and other countries you've lived in or traveled to?
That's a bit of a difficult question to answer, because there are endless cultural
Yeah, super
differences
broad.
between the country. And even I grew up with my own cultural differences between my Swiss side and my Latino side, where I would move between countries depending on my father's job. Most of my childhood was spent between Europe and Latin America. Uh, but yeah, America, it's the United States. It's very much its own beast with its own culture. It's the most individualist country that I've encountered. Everyone is there's a bit of isolation for everyone, and I think part of it is people are just so very likely to move. People move for college and then they find a job on the other side of the country, and so the people you grow up with are not the people you end up with later in life, and it affects so much of everything, where it creates a lot of distance between people.
Yeah.
And then right now there's a bit of the weird duality of the nation, where the culture of half of the population is actually very different than the culture from the other half, and the opinions and the ideals are just very different depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I'm like, I want to like start having more conversations because it's good to hear, I think, these different opinions. Because it's like, is it like that dualistic, or like there's some people like more in between? Because I feel like it's a little like there's got to be a little bit more overlap, but it seems like there's a lot of just heightened tensions right now on either
It seems
side.
pretty dualistic to me. I mean, you're literally consuming different realities, and you kind of have to make a decision on where you think reality, the truth is being said, and if you choose that this side is telling you the truth, then the other one can't be telling the truth. So it creates, I think, that's where a lot of it is coming from.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. Um, yeah, talking about like your like Swiss and Latino family, what are some of those differences you ran into?
Um, Well, honestly, my Latino family has a stronger religious background, and it's also complicated because on my mom's side, the Latino family was a very much a big family with a lot of cousins and aunts and uncles. And then on the Swiss side, it was my father was an only son. He had an aunt and a mother, and that was most of it. So most of my extended family is very much more on the Guatemalan side. And I ended up getting way more attached to the Swiss countries and the European nations. That's where I ended up spending a lot of my teenage years. So a lot of my political beliefs and all that very much got formed more in Switzerland.
Yeah, and so you said you lived with your grandmother in high school. Was that because of like continuing staying in like to finish out your education?
It was because at some point in time, my parents moved to Poland, and I actually didn't like living in Poland very much. One big reason was I did not speak Polish nor Russian. So my world was very much limited to the confines of the French school that I went to, and with very little opportunity to do anything outside of it or socialize with people out of it. And in Switzerland, I had already experienced a different lifestyle where I go out a lot and do things with people and meet new people. And I ended up missing that. And as far as my parents go, it was very much, well, education is better in Switzerland than the French school in Poland. And my grades were not super great when I was living in Poland, but I had really good grades when I was living in Switzerland. And I think it was just the learning environment was just much better for me in Switzerland. So part of it was, yeah, education. I would be better educated in Switzerland, and some of it was just a social and mental health aspect. Switzerland was just better for me.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Well, it's been really great having you on the show, Annick, and thank you so much for your time, and really enjoyed talking with you.
You're welcome. I always enjoy talking with you too.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a single show. Interested in being on the show? Know someone that might be a good fit? Use the nomination form in the description.